The story of Elliot and Sophia was no longer just about a bet or proving something to others. It had evolved into a story of love, redemption, and the power of transformation. Through their efforts, they had shown the world that the greatest wealth was not in material possessions, but in the lives we touch, the differences we make, and the hearts we change along the way. And as they looked to the future, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, knowing that their love and commitment to each other, and to the world, was the strongest foundation of all. Later that day, Maria and Clara walked into a local art supply store, their excitement palpable. Clara carefully selected paints, brushes, and a sketch pad, her eyes lighting up with every item she added to the basket. Maria watched her daughter, feeling a rare sense of accomplishment. For once, she didn't have to say no. At the checkout counter, Clara hugged Maria tightly. "This is perfect, Mom. I can't wait to start." "You deserve it," Maria said, her voice firm. "Now show them what you can do." Back at home, Clara worked late into the night, her focus unshakable as she poured her heart into her project. Maria stayed up with her, offering snacks and encouragement. She could see the fire in Clara's eyes, the determination to create something extraordinary. It reminded Maria of her own dreams she had set aside long ago to provide for her family. The next morning, Ethan returned to his suite after a meeting, his mood sour. The business deal he'd been working on had hit a snag, and his usual confidence felt shaken. As he entered the room, his gaze fell on the freshly made bed and the spotless surfaces. It was as if no one had ever been there. He thought about the maid again, Maria, wasn't it? And wondered briefly what she had done with the tip. The thought passed quickly as he returned to his laptop, burying himself in work. That afternoon, Maria left for work as Clara finalized her submission for the school competition. Clara carefully packed her canvas into a protective case, her hands trembling slightly with excitement. "Mom's going to be so proud," she whispered to herself. At the hotel, Maria moved through her day with a renewed energy. She carried with her the image of Clara's smile and the knowledge that, for once, she had been able to give her daughter something meaningful. As she entered Ethan's suite to clean, she noticed the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the air. His laptop and briefcase were gone, signaling that he'd stepped out for another busy day. Maria worked quickly but meticulously. Every surface sparkled by the time she finished, and she allowed herself a small moment of pride. Before leaving, she glanced out the window at the sprawling city below. It was a reminder of the world Ethan lived in, a world so far removed from her own. But for the first time, she didn't feel envious. Instead, she felt a quiet gratitude for what she had, especially Clara. The next evening, Clara's school hosted the art competition. The gymnasium had been transformed into a gallery, with rows of easels displaying student artwork. Parents, teachers, and local artists milled about, admiring the talent on display. Maria stood to the side, her heart pounding as she watched Clara speak to one of the judges. Her daughter's voice was steady, confident, and filled with passion as she described her piece, a vibrant depiction of a mother and daughter standing hand in hand, their figures surrounded by swirling colors representing dreams and perseverance. The painting captivated everyone who saw it. One of the judges, a prominent local gallery owner, leaned closer, his expression thoughtful. "What inspired this?" he asked. Clara glanced at Maria, her eyes shining. "My mom. She's the strongest person I know. This painting is about how she's always been there for me, even when things were tough." Maria felt tears prick her eyes. She had worked so hard for so long, often wondering if her sacrifices were enough. But in that moment, hearing Clara's words, she knew that every late night and every penny stretched had been worth it. Across town, Ethan attended a networking event hosted by a client who happened to be one of the sponsors of the competition. The event was held in a nearby community center, and Ethan begrudgingly made his way there after a long day of meetings. As he entered the room, he noticed a buzz of excitement in one corner. Curious, he approached the small crowd and realized they were gathered around the artwork from the school competition. His eyes fell on a striking piece, a mother and daughter, their bond radiating from the canvas in a way that felt both intimate and universal. He read the small card below the painting, title, Unbreakable. Artist, Clara Lopez. The name struck him like a bolt of lightning. Lopez, the maid. Could it be? Before he could process the connection, Clara herself walked up to the group, beaming as she answered questions about her work. Ethan listened, fascinated, as she spoke about her mother's influence and the importance of small acts of kindness. "I wouldn't be here without her," Clara said. "She always puts me first even when it's hard." Like last week, She used a tip from one of her hotel jobs to buy me the supplies I needed for this competition. Ethan's breath caught. The $100 tip. It had seemed insignificant at the time, but hearing Clara's words, he realized it had set something in motion he hadn't anticipated. Ethan returned to the hotel that evening, his thoughts racing. For years he had prided himself on being a self-made man, believing that his success was the result of his own hard work and ambition. But tonight he couldn't ignore the ripple effect of his small, thoughtless gesture. He requested to see Maria. When she arrived, her face was a mixture of confusion and apprehension. "Mr. Cross? Is something wrong?" "No," Ethan said quickly, his voice uncharacteristically soft. I saw Clara's artwork tonight." Maria's eyes widened. "You were there?" Ethan nodded. "Yes. And I heard what she said about you." "About the tip?" Maria shifted uncomfortably. "I hope you don't mind." "It wasn't about the money, it was about what it allowed us to do." "I don't mind," Ethan said, shaking his head. "I'm glad it helped. I just never imagined it would lead to something like that." Maria hesitated, unsure how to respond. Finally she said, "Sometimes even the smallest things can make a big difference." Ethan looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "You've given her something money can't buy. I can see that now." Maria smiled, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. "She inspires me every day. All I want is for her to have opportunities one never did." The next morning Ethan sat at the desk in his suite, staring at his laptop. His mind kept drifting back to Maria and Clara. He realized how detached he had become from the world outside his wealth and success. That $100 had been an afterthought to him, but to Maria, it had been a lifeline. He closed his laptop and made a decision. Picking up the phone, he called his assistant. "I need you to arrange something for me. And make it happen quickly." A week later, Maria and Clara were invited to a private meeting in one of the hotel's grand ballrooms. Maria was nervous, unsure of what to expect. When they arrived, they found Ethan waiting for them, a warm smile on his face. "I hope I'm not overstepping," Ethan began, "but I wanted to do something for both of you." He handed Clara an envelope. Inside was a full scholarship to a prestigious art academy, covering all her expenses for the next 4 years. Clara gasped, her eyes filling with tears. This can't be real." "It's real," Ethan said. "You have a gift, Clara. The world deserves to see it." Maria's voice trembled as she said, "Mr. Cross, I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," Ethan replied. "This is my way of repaying a debt I didn't even realize I owed." As Maria and Clara hugged, Ethan felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. For the first time he understood that true wealth wasn't about what you had, it was about what you could give. The weight of the moment lingered in the room as Clara clutched the envelope to her chest. Tears welled in her eyes, her expression shifting between disbelief and gratitude. Maria, standing beside her, looked equally stunned. Ethan could see the mixture of emotions in her face: gratitude, pride, and something deeper, something almost too profound for words. "You've changed our lives," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if you realize how much this means." Ethan smiled softly, his usual composed demeanor giving way to genuine humility. "It's not about changing lives," he said. "It's about recognizing what's already there. Clara's talent, your strength, it was all there long before I came into the picture." Maria shook her head, blinking back tears. "But you gave us the chance. That's something I could never have imagined." Clara stepped forward, her voice still shaky. "Mr. Cross, I don't know how to thank you. This scholarship, it's everything I've ever dreamed of." Ethan crouched slightly to meet Clara at eye level. "Don't thank me," he said. "Thank your mom. She's the one who made this happen. I just gave a small nudge." Clara looked back at Maria, her gaze full of love and admiration. "Mom's the best. She's always believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself." Maria blushed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You've always been worth believing in, Mija." Later that evening, Ethan sat alone in his suite, gazing out at the city skyline. The sprawling view he had taken for granted so many times now felt different, as if the lights of the city carried a new significance. For years he had measured his success in numbers: deals closed, profits earned, assets accumulated. But tonight he felt something deeper, something far more fulfilling. He thought about Clara's painting, the way it had captured something so raw and beautiful, a bond that transcended the struggles of life. That painting, he realized, wasn't just about Maria and Clara. It was a reflection of every parent who sacrificed for their child, every dream that had to be put on hold so another could flourish. It was a reflection of humanity itself. His phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. It was Paul, his business partner. "How's everything going over there?" Paul asked. Ethan hesitated before answering. "Better than I expected," he said. "It's been eye-opening." Paul chuckled. "That's a first. What happened?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his gaze still fixed on the lights outside. "Let's just say I learned that a small gesture can ripple out in ways you'd never expect." Paul was quiet for a moment. "Sounds like you're having one of those rare epiphanies." "Maybe I am," Ethan admitted. "And for once, it doesn't involve a deal or a profit margin." Paul laughed lightly. "That's growth, my friend. What's next for you?" Ethan smiled faintly, the answer coming to him with surprising clarity. Something different. The next few weeks brought subtle but significant changes to Ethan's life. He began spending more time away from his usual routines, finding ways to connect with people he had previously overlooked. At the hotel, he took the time to learn the names of the staff and listen to their stories. It was a small step, but one that felt meaningful. One day, as he walked through the lobby, he spotted Maria cleaning near the entrance. She looked up and offered him a warm smile. It was no longer the obligatory smile of an employee but one of genuine connection. "How's Clara doing?" Ethan asked, pausing to talk. "She's already started preparing for her first semester," Maria said, her pride evident. "She's so excited. Every day she thanks me for believing in her." "She should be thanking herself too," Ethan said. "She's the one with the talent and drive." Maria nodded. "But sometimes people need someone to remind them of their worth. That's what you did for us." Ethan felt a lump in his throat, her words striking a chord. "You reminded me of something too," he said quietly. "What it means to give without expecting anything in return." Maria tilted her head, her expression curious. "And what have you learned?" "That giving isn't about charity," Ethan replied. "It's about recognizing the potential in others and helping them see it for themselves." Months later, Ethan attended Clara's first gallery showcase as a freshman at the Art Academy. The event was held in a sleek, modern space filled with aspiring artists and their work. Clara's section was a highlight, her pieces drawing a steady stream of admirers. Ethan stood in the background, watching as Clara explained her art to a group of guests. Her confidence had grown, her voice steady and passionate. Maria stood beside her, beaming with pride. One of Clara's paintings caught Ethan's attention. It depicted a man standing at a crossroads, his silhouette framed by beams of light cutting through the shadows. The title card read, "The Ripple Effect." When Clara noticed Ethan studying the painting, she approached him. "Do you like it?" she asked. "It's incredible," Ethan said, his voice filled with awe. "What inspired it?" Clara smiled, her eyes bright. "You did?" Ethan blinked, taken aback. "Me?" She nodded. "You showed me how one small act can change everything. That's what this painting is about. The way kindness and generosity ripple out, touching lives in ways we don't always see." Ethan felt a wave of emotion wash over him. "Thank you, Clara. That means more to me than you know." As the night drew to a close, Ethan stood with Maria and Clara, the three of them watching as the guests filtered out of the gallery. Maria turned to Ethan, her expression warm. "You've become part of our story," she said. "And we'll never forget that." Ethan smiled, his heart full. "It's a story I'm proud to be part of." For the first time in his life, Ethan understood that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars or possessions. It was measured in the lives you touched, the connections you built, and the legacy you left behind. And as he walked out of the gallery that night, he felt richer than he ever had before. The weeks following Clara's gallery showcase were transformative for Ethan in ways he hadn't expected. He began to look at the world, and his role in it, differently. For years he had been chasing the next deal, the next success, and the next accolade. Now he was chasing something intangible but far more rewarding: connection and purpose. Ethan started volunteering his time and resources to support young artists like Clara. Inspired by her story, he funded a scholarship program for underprivileged students with artistic talents. Maria and Clara became the faces of the initiative, sharing their journey to inspire others to pursue their dreams despite the odds. One day, as Ethan walked through the bustling community center that now housed the scholarship program's headquarters, Maria approached him. She carried a folder filled with applications from hopeful students, her eyes alight with enthusiasm. "You've created something incredible here," she said, handing him the folder. "These kids wouldn't have had a chance without you." Ethan smiled, flipping through the pages. "It's not just me," he said. "It's you. It's Clara. It's all of us working together." Maria looked at him for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "You've changed, Ethan." He chuckled. "I've had good teachers. A few months later, Clara received her first major recognition as an artist. One of her paintings, Unbreakable, was chosen to be displayed in a prestigious gallery in New York City. The news sent shockwaves of excitement through her family and the scholarship program. Ethan insisted on flying both Clara and Maria to New York for the opening night. The trip was a whirlwind of new experiences for Maria, who had never traveled outside their city. Ethan made sure every detail was taken care of, but he did so quietly, allowing Maria and Clara to shine. The gallery event was a stunning success. Clara's painting was the centerpiece of the exhibit, drawing praise from critics and collectors alike. Maria stood off to the side, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter bask in the glow of her accomplishments. Ethan joined her, his voice low but warm. "You should be proud. This is her moment, but it's yours too." Maria turned to him, her expression filled with gratitude. "I am proud. Of her, of everything we've been through. And I'm grateful. To you?" Ethan shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. This was always in her, you just gave her the courage to bring it out." Maria smiled, wiping away a tear. "You gave us both courage, Ethan. You reminded us that dreams are worth fighting for." As they left the gallery that night, the three of them walked together through the streets of New York. Clara carried a small bouquet of flowers she had been given by a fan, her face glowing with joy. Maria and Ethan walked beside her, their steps in sync, their conversation light and easy. It struck Ethan then how much his life had changed. The man he had been, detached, driven, and distant, felt like a stranger now. In his place was someone who cared deeply, someone who understood the value of human connection. As they reached their hotel, Clara paused, looking up at the towering building. "Do you think I'll ever have something like this?" she asked, her tone curious. Maria laughed softly. "If you keep working as hard as you do, you'll have whatever you want." Ethan nodded, his smile wide. "And when you do, remember where you came from. Remember what matters." Clara looked at him, her expression serious. "I will." The next morning, Ethan woke early and sat by the window in his hotel room, sipping his coffee as the city came to life outside. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, about the small, seemingly insignificant choices that had changed the course of so many lives. The $100 tip. It had been an afterthought at the time, a gesture with no deeper meaning. But it had sparked something, a ripple that had grown into a wave touching not just Maria and Clara but countless others. Ethan realized then that the true measure of his success wasn't in his bank account or his business deals. It was in the lives he had helped shape, the opportunities he had created, and the legacy he was building. He picked up his phone and called Maria. When she answered, her voice was warm and cheerful. "Good morning," she said. "You're up early?" "Couldn't sleep," Ethan replied. "Too much on my mind." Maria chuckled. "Good things, I hope?" "The best," Ethan said. "I just wanted to thank you. For everything." Maria's voice softened. "You don't have to thank me, Ethan. We're all in this together." Ethan smiled. "We are. And I wouldn't have it any other way." In the months and years that followed, Ethan continued to grow the scholarship program, working closely with Maria and Clara to support young artists from all walks of life. Together, they built a community that celebrated resilience, creativity, and the power of small acts of kindness. And for Ethan, that was the greatest success of all. As the years unfolded, Ethan's commitment to the scholarship program grew deeper. It wasn't just a side project anymore, it became the centerpiece of his life. He scaled back his involvement in his business empire, delegating more to trusted partners so he could focus on the work that truly mattered to him. Maria became more than just a partner in the initiative, she became its heart. Her warmth and relatability resonated with the students and their families. To them, she wasn't just an organizer, she was living proof of what resilience and hope could achieve. Her story and Clara's became the cornerstone of the program's message. Dreams are within reach, no matter how far away they seem. One day, as Maria and Ethan prepared for a major gala fundraiser to support the scholarship program's expansion, Maria reflected on how far they had come. The event was set to take place at the very same Grand Marquis Hotel where Ethan and Maria's story had first intersected. Maria stood in the grand ballroom, overseeing the final details. The room was stunning, draped in soft golden lights and decorated with artwork from scholarship recipients. Ethan walked in, his usual polished demeanor softened by a genuine smile. "Feels full circle, doesn't it?" Ethan said, joining Maria. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I never imagined I'd be standing here for something like this. Back then, I was just trying to get through each day." Ethan looked around the room, taking in the vibrant displays and the buzzing anticipation of the staff preparing for the evening. And now you're helping others do more than just get through. You're helping them dream. Maria smiled, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. I couldn't have done this without you. Ethan shook his head. This was always in you, Maria. All I did was leave a tip. They both laughed softly, the humor lightening the moment. That evening, the gala was a resounding success. Guests from all walks of life, business leaders, artists, educators, and former scholarship recipients, came together to celebrate the program's achievements. The air was electric with inspiration and hope. Clara, now a professional artist and one of the scholarship's most celebrated alumni, gave the keynote speech. Standing on the same stage where Ethan had once delivered business presentations, she captivated the audience with her story. I wouldn't be here without this program, Clara said, her voice steady but full of emotion. But this program wouldn't exist without the power of one small act. A $100 tip may seem insignificant, but it changed everything for me and my mom. And tonight, we're here to make sure that ripple effect reaches even further. The audience erupted into applause, some wiping away tears as Clara left the stage. Ethan and Maria stood together, their pride evident as they watched her descend from the podium. She's extraordinary, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. Maria nodded, her eyes glistening. She's everything I could have hoped for. And more. After the gala, as the guests mingled and shared stories, Ethan found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. He thought about the life he had once led, a life filled with wealth and power but devoid of real connection. He thought about the moment he'd left that tip, unaware of the ripple it would create. Now, standing in the midst of a thriving community built on generosity and resilience, Ethan felt a profound sense of fulfillment. For the first time, he understood that his true legacy wasn't in the skyscrapers bearing his name or the balance sheets of his companies. It was in the lives he had touched, the opportunities he had helped create, and the bonds he had forged along the way. As the evening wound down, Ethan, Maria, and Clara stepped outside onto the hotel's grand terrace. The city sparkled below them, its lights twinkling like stars. What's next? Clara asked, leaning against the railing. We've come so far, but I feel like we're just getting started. Maria laughed softly. That's because dreams don't stop, Mija. They keep growing. Ethan nodded, his smile wide. And we'll keep growing with them. For a moment, the three of them stood in silence, taking in the view. It wasn't just the city they were looking at, it was the future filled with endless possibilities. As they turned to head back inside, Ethan paused, his gaze lingering on Maria and Clara. He felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the chance to be part of their story, to have played a role in something so much bigger than himself. During this time, Ethan Cross felt truly wealthy, not in dollars but in meaning, connection, and the immeasurable joy of making a difference. In the months following the gala, the scholarship program flourished. Stories began to pour in from students whose lives were changed by the opportunities it provided. Some had gone on to attend prestigious schools, others had launched careers in fields they once thought were out of reach. Every success story was a testament to the ripple effect Ethan, Maria, and Clara had helped set in motion. Ethan made it a point to visit the program's headquarters regularly. He met with students, listened to their dreams, and shared his own lessons about perseverance and the importance of seizing opportunities. For many of the students, Ethan wasn't just a benefactor. He was an example of how one person's actions could create a path for others. One afternoon, Ethan walked into the program's art studio, a bright, lively space filled with easels, paints, and the energy of budding artists. Clara was there, mentoring a group of teenagers as they worked on their pieces. She had taken on a leadership role within the program, her success as an artist making her an inspiration to others. As Ethan watched her guide the students with patience and passion, Maria approached him from across the room. She carried a small, wrapped package in her hands. I've been meaning to give you this, Maria said, holding out the package. It's something Clara and I worked on together. Ethan took the package, his curiosity piqued. As he unwrapped it, he revealed a framed painting. It depicted a single droplet of water falling into a calm pond, the ripples spreading outward in perfect circles. The detail was stunning, the imagery both simple and profound. It's called The First Drop, Maria explained. Clara wanted to capture what this program is all about, how one small act can create endless possibilities. Ethan stared at the painting, his throat tightening. It's beautiful, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you. Maria smiled. No, Ethan. Thank you. For believing in us. For seeing what was possible. As time passed, Ethan's life continued to evolve. His focus shifted entirely from building his personal wealth to building a legacy that would outlast him. He began funding similar programs in other cities, partnering with community leaders to identify areas where his resources could make the greatest impact. Maria became a key figure in these efforts, her story and perspective grounding the work in authenticity. She often spoke at events, sharing how a single moment of kindness had transformed her life and inspired her to give back. Her humility and warmth resonated with audiences, reminding them of the humanity behind every initiative. Clara, meanwhile, continued to thrive as an artist. Her work gained national recognition, and her pieces were featured in galleries and museums across the country. Despite her success, she remained deeply connected to the scholarship program, often returning to mentor students and share her journey. Years later, on the 10th anniversary of the program's founding, a grand celebration was held in the very first community center where it all began. The room was filled with students, families, and supporters who had been part of the program's journey. The walls were lined with artwork created by scholarship recipients, each piece telling a story of hope and resilience. Ethan stood at the center of the room, surrounded by the people whose lives had intersected with his in ways he never could have imagined. Maria and Clara stood beside him, their presence a constant reminder of how far they had come together. As the event began, Clara took the stage to deliver a speech. She spoke about the power of small actions, the importance of believing in others, and the legacy of kindness that had shaped her life. Her words moved the audience to tears, their applause thunderous as she stepped down. Ethan was the last to speak. As he looked out at the crowd, he felt a wave of gratitude that was almost overwhelming. This program started with something small, Ethan began, his voice steady. A single moment, a single gesture. At the time, I didn't realize its significance. But now, standing here, I see the incredible ripple effect it created. He paused, his gaze shifting to Maria and Clara. This isn't just my story. It's Maria's story. Clara's story. It's the story of every student who dared to dream, every parent who sacrificed, and every person who chose to give, even when they didn't have to. The room was silent, every eye on Ethan as he continued. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that we all have the power to be that first drop. To set something in motion that goes beyond ourselves. And when we do, the possibilities are endless. The crowd rose to their feet, their applause echoing through the room. Ethan stepped down from the stage, joining Maria and Clara as they embraced him. That night, as Ethan stood on the balcony of his suite, looking out at the city below, he felt a profound sense of peace. His life was no longer about chasing achievements or accumulating wealth. It was about connection, purpose, and leaving the world better than he had found it. And as he thought back to that $100 tip, the gesture that had set everything in motion, he smiled, knowing that sometimes, the smallest actions truly have the greatest impact. The days following the program's 10-year celebration were filled with reflection for Ethan. As the echoes of applause faded, the memories of everything he had built, and everyone he had impacted, lingered. He thought of the countless students who had walked through the doors of the program, carrying dreams they once thought were impossible. He thought of Clara's transformation from a determined teenager to a national icon of artistic excellence. But most of all, he thought of Maria, whose unwavering strength had been the catalyst for it all. Ethan knew his journey wasn't over. He began focusing on expanding the scholarship program internationally, bringing the same opportunities to students in underserved communities around the world. With Maria and Clara by his side, the program evolved into a global movement. They named it Ripple Foundation, inspired by the painting Maria and Clara had gifted him. One day, as Ethan prepared for a trip to launch a new chapter of the program in South America, he visited Maria at her home. Clara was out of town for an exhibition, leaving the two of them alone in the cozy space that had once been a modest apartment but now reflected Maria's growth and success. "I wanted to see you before I left," Ethan said, handing her a folder. "This is the plan for the new chapter in Brazil. I'd love for you to look it over." Maria took the folder, glancing through its contents. "You've really poured your heart into this," she said, her voice filled with admiration. Ethan smiled. "I had good inspiration." Maria closed the folder and looked at him, her gaze steady. "You know, I used to think people like you and me came from such different worlds. But now I see that we're not so different after all." Ethan tilted his head, curious. "What changed your mind?" Maria smiled softly. "You did. You showed me that kindness can cross any boundary. And you reminded me that it's not where we start but where we choose to go that defines us." Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. "I could say the same about you, Maria. You've taught me more than you realize." For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, the weight of their shared history grounding them. Then Maria broke the quiet with a question. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't left that tip? Ethan laughed lightly, leaning back in his chair. All the time. And every time I come to the same conclusion. It was fate. Maria raised an eyebrow. Fate? Ethan nodded. Sometimes the universe gives you a nudge in the right direction. That tip was mine. It set everything in motion. But it was your strength and Clara's talent that turned it into something extraordinary. Maria chuckled. You're not so bad at this inspirational talk, Ethan Cross. He smiled. I've had practice. As the years continued, Ripple Foundation became a beacon of hope for communities worldwide. Ethan stepped back from the day-to-day operations, entrusting Maria to take the lead as the foundation's director. Her story became the heart of the organization, inspiring donors, partners, and beneficiaries alike. Clara, now a renowned artist, used her platform to amplify the foundation's mission. Her work often depicted themes of resilience, community, and transformation, drawing from her own journey. One of her most famous pieces, The Ripple Effect, was permanently displayed in the United Nations headquarters, symbolizing the power of small acts to create global change. On Ethan's 65th birthday, Maria and Clara organized a surprise celebration at the foundation's headquarters. The room was filled with friends, colleagues, and students whose lives Ethan had touched over the years. The walls were adorned with photographs and artwork from the foundation's history, each piece a testament to its impact. When Ethan entered the room, the crowd erupted in cheers. Clara stepped forward, a microphone in hand. Ethan Cross, she began, her voice steady but emotional. You taught us that one small action can change the world. And today we celebrate not just your birthday but the legacy you've built. A legacy of hope, kindness, and endless possibilities. The crowd applauded as Clara handed Ethan the microphone. He looked out at the sea of faces, each one representing a life he had touched. For a moment, he was overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had achieved together. I don't know what to say, Ethan began, his voice thick with emotion. Except thank you. Thank you for letting me be a part of your journeys. Thank you for reminding me that success isn't about what we accumulate but what we give. He paused, his gaze landing on Maria and Clara. And thank you for being my family. You've given my life a meaning I never knew it could have. As the evening came to a close, Ethan stood on the balcony of the foundation's headquarters, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. Maria joined him, a glass of champagne in hand. You did good, Ethan, she said, her voice warm. You've changed so many lives. Ethan smiled, his heart full. We did good, Maria. Together. Maria clinked her glass against his, their shared journey reflected in their smiles. And as they stood there, the ripple effect of their actions continued to spread, touching lives far beyond what either of them could have imagined. The years that followed solidified Ripple Foundation as one of the most impactful initiatives of its kind. Its reach extended to over a dozen countries, and its story became a blueprint for what could happen when kindness and determination came together. Ethan, though older now, remained a steady presence, attending events, meeting students, and mentoring the next generation of leaders. One crisp autumn afternoon, Ethan visited the original community center where the foundation had started. The building, now renovated and expanded, was a hub of activity. Children laughed as they painted murals, young adults rehearsed speeches for a debate, and aspiring artists sketched quietly in one of the dedicated art rooms. Ethan walked through the halls, taking it all in. He was greeted warmly by staff and students, many of whom recognized him from stories passed down over the years. As he entered the main hall, he noticed a new addition, a wall of framed portraits, each one depicting a graduate of the program who had gone on to achieve something extraordinary. At the center of the wall was a plaque that read, "The Ripple Wall, proof that one drop can create endless waves." Ethan felt a swell of pride as he read the names and accomplishments beneath each portrait. Doctors, engineers, artists, teachers, all of them had started their journey here. It was a tangible reminder of the impact the foundation had made. Later that evening, Ethan returned to his home, a modest but comfortable place he had chosen after selling off his penthouse years ago. He preferred the simplicity now, finding joy in the quiet moments that life offered. As he sat in his study, looking over old photos and documents from the foundation's early days, his phone buzzed. It was a video call from Clara. "Hey Dad," she greeted, her face lighting up the screen. Though she wasn't his biological daughter, Clara had started calling him Dad years ago, and it had stuck. "Hey kiddo," Ethan replied, his voice warm. "How's the exhibition going?" "It's amazing," Clara said, tilting her phone to show a bustling gallery behind her. "People are loving the new series. But I wanted to call and share something special. Ethan leaned forward, curious. What's that? Clara turned the camera to focus on a painting. It was a reimagining of her earlier work, The Ripple Effect. But this time, the ripples extended further, their edges blending into silhouettes of people reaching out to one another. It's called Legacy, Clara explained. It's about how one act of kindness doesn't just touch one life, it touches countless others. And it's all because of you, Dad? Ethan felt his throat tighten, his eyes misting over. You're the legacy, Clara. You and your mom. I just left a tip. Clara shook her head, smiling. You didn't just leave a tip. You believed in us. You saw potential where others didn't. And now look what it's become. A few months later, the foundation celebrated its 20th anniversary with a grand event. It was held in a sprawling auditorium, filled with alumni, supporters, and partners from around the world. Ethan, now in his 70s, was invited to give the closing remarks. As he took the stage, the crowd rose to their feet, the applause thunderous. Ethan paused for a moment, taking it all in. He looked out at the faces before him, each one a testament to the journey they had all taken together. When I started this journey, Ethan began, his voice steady but emotional, I didn't know where it would lead. I didn't plan for it. I didn't strategize it. All I did was leave a tip. A simple gesture, one I thought was insignificant. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. But what I've learned is that there's no such thing as an insignificant gesture. Every action we take has the potential to create ripples that reach farther than we can imagine. Ethan smiled, his eyes shining. This foundation isn't about me. It's about all of you. It's about Maria and Clara, who showed me what resilience and love look like. It's about every student who dared to dream, every donor who believed, and every mentor who gave their time. The room was silent, the weight of his words settling over the audience. My hope, Ethan continued, is that each of you becomes that first drop in someone else's life. That you continue the ripple effect we've started here. Because together we can change the world. The crowd erupted into applause, their standing ovation lasting long after Ethan had stepped off the stage. Maria and Clara were waiting for him, their faces glowing with pride. You did good, Maria said, her voice soft. Ethan chuckled. We did good. That night, as Ethan sat alone on the balcony of his hotel room, he looked up at the stars. He thought about the life he had lived, the people he had met, and the countless lives he had touched. And for the first time he felt at peace, knowing that his legacy would endure long after he was gone. The ripple effect, he realized, never truly ends. It keeps growing, spreading light and hope in ways we may never see. And that, he thought, was the most beautiful thing of all. The years after the 20th anniversary celebration brought more milestones for the Ripple Foundation. Ethan transitioned into an advisory role, spending more time mentoring new leaders within the organization. Maria took the reins as the foundation's president, steering its mission with the same warmth and dedication that had defined her journey from the start. Clara, now an established artist and philanthropist, expanded her work to include programs for young creatives worldwide. She collaborated with the foundation to create Ripple Studios, a global network of art spaces where students could explore their talents and share their stories. One quiet afternoon, Ethan found himself back at the original community center. He had taken to visiting the space whenever he needed to reflect. Walking through its halls, he noticed how much it had grown. New classrooms, expanded art studios, and even a small auditorium for performances and lectures. Yet, despite the changes, the essence of the center remained the same, a place where dreams took root. Ethan stopped at the wall of portraits, now larger than ever. Each framed face represented a story of triumph, resilience, and hope. His eyes settled on Clara's portrait, which had recently been added to the center. The caption beneath it read, Clara Lopez, artist, mentor, Ripple alumni. Quite the legacy, isn't it? Maria's voice broke the quiet. Ethan turned to see her standing behind him, a soft smile on her face. She had aged gracefully, her presence as calming and grounding as ever. It's more than I ever imagined, Ethan said, his voice filled with pride. Maria stepped closer, her gaze lingering on the wall. You started this, Ethan. Whether you meant to or not, you planted the first seed. Ethan chuckled. I think we've established by now that it wasn't just me. You and Clara, this wouldn't exist without you. Maria smiled, tilting her head. Maybe. But it's a partnership. We all had a role to play. They stood in companionable silence for a moment before Maria spoke again. You know, Clara wants to name the next foundation chapter after you. Ethan raised an eyebrow. The Ethan Cross chapter? Sounds a little self-important, don't you think? Maria laughed. It's not about ego, Ethan. It's about honoring what you've built. Ethan shook his head, a playful grin on his face. If she insists, I'll allow it. But only if we add your name next to mine. Maria nudged him lightly. Deal? As time went on, Ethan began to slow down. His once bustling schedule now included quiet mornings at home, leisurely walks, and long conversations with Maria and Clara. He still attended foundation events, but he preferred to watch from the sidelines, letting others take the spotlight. One evening, Clara invited him to her latest exhibition, which featured a series of paintings titled Foundations. Each piece depicted a moment or person who had shaped her journey. Ethan found himself drawn to one painting in particular. It was a simple image, a woman standing in a hotel room holding a $100 bill with a look of quiet determination on her face. The caption read, Maria Lopez, the first drop. Ethan's throat tightened as he stared at the painting. Clara appeared beside him, her smile warm. I thought it was time people knew where it all began. Ethan turned to her, his voice soft. You're incredible, Clara. You know that. Clara shrugged playfully. I had good role models. In his final years, Ethan spent most of his time surrounded by the people who mattered most. He watched as the foundation continued to grow, as students became leaders and leaders became inspirations. The ripple effect, once a single drop in a vast ocean, had become a tidal wave of change. One crisp autumn morning, Ethan sat on the porch of his modest home, a cup of coffee in hand. Maria joined him, carrying a stack of letters from Foundation alumni. They spent the morning reading through them, each story a testament to the lives they had touched. You know, Ethan said, setting down his coffee, I think I finally understand what legacy really means. Maria looked at him, her expression curious. And what's that? Ethan smiled, his gaze distant. It's not about what you leave behind. It's about what you set in motion. It's the people you inspire, the lives you change, and the hope you ignite. That's what lasts. Maria reached over, placing her hand on his. You've done all of that, Ethan. And so much more. When Ethan Cross passed away peacefully a few years later, the world mourned the loss of a man who had touched countless lives. His memorial service was held at the original community center, the place where it had all begun. People from all over the world attended, students, artists, partners, and friends, all united by the legacy he had left behind. Clara delivered the eulogy, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. Ethan Cross taught us that one small act can change the world. He didn't just leave a legacy, he created one that will continue to grow for generations to come. He was our first drop, and his ripples will never fade. As the service ended, Maria stood by Clara's side, her heart heavy but full. Together, they looked out at the sea of faces, each one a testament to Ethan's life and impact. And as they walked out into the sunlight, they knew that the ripple effect Ethan had started would continue to spread, creating waves of hope, kindness, and change that would reach far beyond what any of them could imagine. In the years after Ethan's passing, his vision continued to flourish through the Ripple Foundation. His name became synonymous with kindness, transformation, and the power of a single gesture. Maria and Clara carried his legacy forward, ensuring that the foundation remained true to its roots while expanding its reach even further. Maria often found herself reflecting on the moments that had shaped their journey, Ethan's quiet generosity, Clara's determination, and her own resilience in the face of hardship. She saw those traits mirrored in the students they helped every day. Each scholarship granted, each artist mentored, and each story shared reminded her of the ripple Ethan had started, now touching lives across the globe. Clara, now an internationally celebrated artist, continued to honor Ethan's memory through her work. She dedicated her most recent exhibition, Ripples of Change, to the countless lives the foundation had transformed. The centerpiece of the collection was a portrait of Ethan, rendered with the warmth and depth that only Clara could capture. It was titled The First Drop, and it became one of her most iconic pieces. At the unveiling of the exhibit, Maria stood beside Clara, her heart swelling with pride. The room was filled with laughter, tears, and stories of gratitude from those who had been impacted by the foundation. Maria could feel Ethan's presence in every corner of the space, as though he were standing with them, smiling quietly. As the event wound down, Maria and Clara found a quiet moment together. They looked at the portrait of Ethan, its eyes seeming to hold the wisdom and kindness he had embodied. "He'd be so proud of you," Maria said softly, her voice steady but emotional. Clara smiled, her eyes glistening. "Of us, Mom. He'd be proud of us." Maria reached for Clara's hand, squeezing it gently. "And we'll keep making him proud." Outside the gallery, the city lights twinkled like stars, a reminder of the boundless possibilities Ethan had helped create. His legacy lived on not just in the foundation, but in every act of kindness inspired by his story. And as Maria and Clara walked into the night, they knew the ripples would never stop. They would continue to spread, creating waves of hope, change, and inspiration for generations to come.